Hi, everybody. I decided to do a standalone midterm review, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes walking you through the midterm without showing you the midterm. So let me put my glasses on. Wonderful. So I'm just going to be pulling up the actual midterm. And as you may have thought, it is 19 points, so that's 1 point per question. And as I kind of get into the midterm itself, let's see. So I'm not going to give you the numbers to the questions because I'm pretty sure that they're in random order. But my goal is to just sort of evoke some of the moments in lecture where I may have brought things up that have to do with questions. So as I begin to look at the midterm, it looks like there is a question on the first history of art and technology lecture. I'm thinking there's at least one question, and it has to do with something that allowed images to be distributed widely that was discussed in lecture. That's the biggest hint I'm going to give you there. Another question about resolution. Specifically about pixel size, which is what we've spent the most time talking about in lecture. And so this question offers you some descriptions, and you're asked to make some judgments about the pixel size. So there are two more questions about resolution and different types of resolution. So specifically, there are two questions around resolution, and one has to do with why certain situations might pose a need for low resolution, whereas certain situations or applications may demand a higher resolution. And that's what those questions sort of are based around. So let's see. There is a question on the history of the Gif format that you can find the answer to this question in the lecture for the mighty Gif. And there's another question about the Gif that I'm not going to talk about because I can't, unfortunately, provide you with any assistance without providing you the answer. So I'm going to skip that one. There's another question about some of the people that were talked about in part 1 and part 2 of the history of art and technology. There is a question sort of that pulls answers from multiple people that were talked about in this lecture. And the question asks you to select which people were not discussed in those series of lectures. So there's also a question about a history of art and technology 2, I believe. And this question asks you to identify one of the computers that was talked about in history of art and technology 1. And this question asks you to correctly identify that unit. There is also a question on history of art and technology 2 would be the lecture that I would think about for this one. The question is which person that we talk about in that lecture made significant intellectual contributions that led to the eventual development of the personal computer. And so that question is in there. And I do know that in the lecture slides, there's when that person comes up in the lecture slides, there's a brief description of what that person's role was in terms of their contributions. So another question about the Art and Technology Part 2, I believe. And this question has to do with identifying some of the historical and cultural developments that led to the rise of the computing era, kind of post-World War II. So in this question, I'm asking you to find some sort of broad, the answers are several broad sort of movements within history and culture at around the same time. And I'm asking you to identify which one sort of contributed to computing culture or early computer culture. So another question on History of Art and Technology Part 2, and that has to do with identifying the brand that popularized the personal computer. So there's a question about History of Art and Technology Part 1 here. And this question is asking what sort of things existed, and be identifying from a multiple choice list, what sort of things existed that gave artists working with computer code and computational technology, what was one of the sort of like common denominators of their work visually? And there's a slide in the Art and Technology Part 2 lecture that specifically addresses this thing. So there is another question about when artists became interested in the potential of using networks and also the early World Wide Web. So the early World Wide Web should be a sort of clue to you that it's not the World Wide Web, which would be like the web of today, maybe. So another thing that might be a clue to you for this one would be there is, I'm pretty sure, a slide in the History of Art and Technology Part 2 that addresses the specific decade in which networks became really kind of a powerful way to communicate work. And that started to happen primarily in the 1990s. Okay, there is a question about the Everything is a Remix video. And in that question, we're talking about appropriation and which artists in particular were sort of identified in the video as being like the perpetual appropriators and sort of overusing our work by other artists, and particularly artists of color. So there's that question. There's a question, a sort of general technical question about managing file size, why that may or may not be important to people. Let's see. Here's another question. This is sort of condensed into a single question. there is a question about the two types of digital images. And we did spend time in class kind of going over those in the What is a Digital Image lecture. But just to refresh your memory, we talked about images being sort of presented to us in the digital world as being made of pixels or being made of vectors. And we talked about pixel-based art as being raster graphics, as sort of the technical term for it, and then also vector graphics. So let me see, the next question is, this is actually one of the two questions that I was referring to earlier. So if you remember, I may have said that there was a question about high resolution images versus low resolution images, and that is this question. So thinking about why those things are important or not, if they're not. And then here's the companion question to that, which is basically like, what are the downsides of working with a certain type of image? And so there is another question about pixel size, where you're given sort of like the list of 3 images, and you have to identify which one has the highest pixel size. And then lastly, what would be one of the benefits? There's a question about why would you want to use pixel-based images as opposed to some other format, such as vector. So that pretty much ties up the midterm. And as I said before, if you have any questions about the midterm, or you have any things that you want to discuss, or things that you might be curious about, feel free to send me an email. I'm available to chat back. And other than that, I'll plan on seeing you in class tomorrow on Tuesday. And I will not plan on seeing you on Thursday, which is our midterm day. So we can all just take the midterm at home in our slippers. So thanks for joining me for a few minutes here. Hopefully it's helpful. And I hope you have a good experience with the midterm. All right, thanks. Bye.